is my presentation on trumpet effects, a presentation on the use of effect pedals with the trumpet, and how you kind of link the two, and how you can use it tastefully, and how people have used it tastefully, essentially. Introduction. So, what is a guitar pedal? These are 5 things that we're going to go through and explain and look into. First one, what is a guitar pedal? Most of you are musicians, so probably understand the concept of a guitar pedal, but for those that don't. Trumpet through a guitar pedal, question mark, exclamation mark. Like, it's quite a weird concept, in my opinion anyway, to have like a brass instrument go through pedals that are designed for an electric instrument. And then I'm going to look at the famous examples of people that did it, such as the legends of Miles Davis, Randy Brecker and Mike Mazmaha, and go through who they are, what they did, why they used it, how they used it, watch some videos, that kind of thing. And then I'm going to ask my lovely friends to play with me. We're going to play with some pedals and play some tunes and basically hear in real life how they work and the downsides, and hopefully hear how they work. And then I'm going to look at mutes versus pedals and why you use pedals, basically. So the guitar pedal essentially is a digital box that alters the sounds of an audio source in its rawest form. So audio source comes in, it changes something to do with that audio, and then sends it out. Is essentially what a guitar pedal does. Traditionally used with the electric guitar, often referred to as stomp boxes or simply guitar pedals. Pedals, because they're designed to be controlled with your foot, like a foot pedal on an organ, for example. So therefore, whilst you're playing live, generally if you're playing guitar, hence why drummers don't really have them, presuming, I don't know, you have both your feet free, so therefore you can tap away and tap dance on a pedal board. Largely simple design, often only have one main button, which is pretty robust, and 3 I can't say that word for the life of me. Basically, pots or knobs, things that you change to affect the sound, and a singular LED, which indicates if the pedal is on. However, with developments in technology, they've become much more complex. So you get like multi-effects boxes and pedals and big boys and with loads of different buttons and stuff, which basically is much more advanced than, say, a single button pedal. When multiple connected together, it's called a signal chain, and it's created in a way that so you can basically have multiple effects on a single signal, and you have to do it in a certain order in order to kind of do it correctly, because if you send like multiple signals, say you have a harmonizer, which basically creates 2 different audio signals because it adds a harmony to it. You send that into a kind of mono single wavelength box, it's going to basically come out weird and not operate to its full potential. History. 1950s, the guitar amps featured built-in effects such as tremolo and reverb, as do the guitar amps in here still. So in that sense, effects with guitars weren't an uncommon thing, you just couldn't really change them mid-set. Electronic transistors came in the late 50s and early 60s and replaced the traditional vacuum tubes, which meant that they're much smaller. And so when things become smaller, they become more applicable, and they managed to fit them into a guitar pedal. In 1962, the Ventures made a homemade distortion fuzz pedal and used it on the song 2,000 Pound B. And basically that was what, from the research I've done, is the first kind of use of the guitar pedal in a song. 1962, Gibson Maestro fuzz pedal came out, and it was like the first electronic transistor guitar pedal mass-produced in that sense. And the Rolling Stones used it in 1965 with the song I Can't Get No Satisfaction. And since then it kind of took off as a cool tone to use, essentially. Jimi Hendrix used pedals early on and assisted its rise in popularity, and Boss now sell 104 different guitar pedals. That's just one company, so it's a pretty big market nowadays. Right, next we're going to look at the guy called Miles Davis, who was kind of influential. And he, from my research, was a very early trumpeter that decided to use pedals. I'll go into it, but yeah, let's have a listen. Davis, wearing some very elaborate shoes, fiddling with a thing called a King wah pedal. He was the first brass player to use pedals largely. He only really used the wah-wah pedal, and he says in his autobiography, "I was using the wah-wah on my trumpet all the time so I could get closer to the voice that Jimmy had when he used the wah-wah on his guitar." So in that sense, his vision and his sound for using the wah pedal was to get closer to the electronic sound of the guitar. He first used this technique in 1970 at the concerts documented on the live albums Live Evil and the Cellar Door Sessions. Another reason for why he didn't want to use, necessarily the traditional mutes for trumpet was so that he basically had both hands free. Because when playing trumpet, correct posture is like that, essentially. But if you're playing with a mute, you're going one-handed, and it's bad for your embouchure and it's bad for your control of the instrument in that sense. So it's much better to have both hands on the instrument. Goldkin in 2019 argued that Davis used the added attack of the King wah to pierce through the chaotic jams and bring his voice back to the fore. And so from that perspective, it's when you listen to the wah, hopefully you'll hear it when I play it. It kind of cuts through the mix quite a lot, and it adds quite a sharp tone that is quite hard not to hear. So in that sense, it's almost a control freak move, trying to get everyone to hear it a little bit when the jams got out of control, which I understand. He was so inspired by the sound of this wah that he made all his keyboard players use them. So when they were playing, your organs and the keyboard and synths and stuff, he would also have your wah pedal. More about the wah pedal. Inspiration actually came from the trumpet. It was named after a trumpeter called Clyde McCoy. And Thompson writes that Clyde was actually a trumpet player who asked Vox for a device that could simulate the sound of a muted trumpet for the use with a keyboard. These early pedals were manufactured in Italy and have pictures of Clyde on the bottom. They were distributed in the US by Thomas Organ Company. Later variants featured Clyde's signature only. And so, it's weird. It's a pedal that was designed to replicate the trumpet, and then one of the most famous trumpeters of all time then was like, oh, that would sound cool on a trumpet. So it's kind of double trouble in that sense. The popularity grew with guitarists so much that they dropped poor Clyde McCoy in the late 1960s. The Crybaby Wah came out in 1968 as the European distributor did not want to sell the same product as the American distributor. So they relabeled it and released it, basically. So you then had your wah pedals then be made into loads of different models, but slight tonal differences, and the European distributor didn't want to sell the same products as the Americans, basically. By the late 1960s, there were almost 40 companies making wah pedals. It began to become. Ooh, technical issues. I'm gonna unplug back in. Stand by, cool. Come on, you got this. Go. Let's we'll take a temporary pause. Just contemplate the concept of the wah sound coming from the trumpet, but then being used on a trumpet. It's like some strange stuff. And now my MacBook's, I've got the spinning wheel of doom.
Is it maybe is your laptop gone frozen or?
No, my laptop's not frozen. I just unplugged that, so it will do. At this point, I was going to do a performance anyway. So, I think we're going to give my MacBook 5 minutes to sort itself out. And we're going to play some music. Basically, the pedals I've got are a Crybaby Wah, a Distortion D1 from Boss, TC Electronics 7-Up, a harmonizer, and the MXR carbon copy. And I was going to go through some other people that use it and how they use it. But, due to technical limitations, we're going to play some music. we're going to play 2 songs, both originals, both using pedals, but using different pedals. I hope you enjoy, basically. Let's go. Yeah, if you give it a minute to turn on, I'll basically reboost it, and then we'll reconvene the presentation. Disco, or the disco tune, because it features the whole 16 bars of disco, and the rest of it's not disco. But it's called the disco tune, so I couldn't think of the name. We're playing Wires. Yes, this next tune is called Wires because Jack came up with the name and we all hated it, and that stuck, basically. So this is Wired. warm now. And hopefully, the MacBook should work. Okay. Thanks, by the way. That's fun. We got to here, didn't we? Cool. Now, part of my inspiration for that was this guy. A guy called Randy Brecker, who, as Andy will well know, played with Frank Zappa, as he may be the biggest Frank Zappa fan I've ever seen. And is basically an all-round legend. Played in the band called the Brecker Brothers, who were ridiculous and kind of big fusion players. And anyway, without any further ado, anyone know the tune? I know Sarah Sands does. What is it?
Donna Lee, yeah.
Donna Lee. There you go.
With the
Potentially the
Check
coolest.
Group.
Yeah, the coolest Donna Lee ever. Was that a bass clarinet? I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure.
Bob Minster.
Yeah. There you go.
Bob Minster.
So Randy Brecker, apart from being an all-round legend, he played with Brecker Brothers and Frank Zappa. He was a big jazz fusion player, basically, that played with a lot of people. Now my question is, why did I write Sponge there? I was going to do another song called Sponge. So if you ignore Sponge and replace that with the video clip I just showed you, he basically uses these pedals. He uses a Neutron envelope filter, which gives like the quack almost, the whack. He's using a harmony mute at the same time, but that's what kind of makes it pop and stand out. And then he also, in other tracks, he's used harmonizers and fuzz pedals and crybaby wah pedals, and his overall effect it cuts through the mix, right? You can hear that solo as clear as daylight. It helps that he's got a class band around him, but if you're not being heard, and your frequencies get all lost. But that quack is so unusual to people that listen; it's hard to ignore. And basically, you're making the trumpet sound more electronic, as it were, and just a different tone that people hadn't really explored that much at this time. Next is a band called Snarky Puppy, and this is a song called Binky, from 2014, I believe. And the trumpetist, a guy called Mike Mazmaha, takes a solo, and it's pretty ridiculous. And I'm going to play it to you. It's pretty cool. Okay, it did not like that. There should be some movement in this video. band Snarky Puppy. He uses pedals a lot. If you know, I've seen him 3 times. I know that a few others in this room have. And as a band, as a whole brass section, they all use individual pedals and playing live, and they all have their different setups and their different ways of doing it. But in this, he's using the MXR Carbon Copy, as you saw me use. He's also using Crybaby Wah and an MXR Blue Box. The Blue Box kind of is an octaver, but he's rolled off all the octave because he loved the sound of like the fuzz almost around it and the distortion that is taking place on his trumpet. Yeah, with no octave, so almost creating a fuzz pedal. I'm not sure why he doesn't use a fuzz pedal, but he uses a Blue Box, and it sounds cool. So, performance. So you saw me perform. I was going to be doing my performance now, but technical problems. The first song, I used the Carbon Copy. I used the Boss DS1, the Wah, and I didn't use the harmonizer. I used the sub and up. And I think part of what intrigues me into it is almost you're limited with the traditional mutes with the trumpet. So you've got your cut mute, your Harman, your Wah, your plunger, then all initially and all completely change the sound, but you don't get any dry. So when you think about effects, right, you've got dry, which is like clean, and you've got wet, which is like your reverbs and your delays and all that kind of stuff. But when you put it through pedals, you can take DI out, and so you can have a clean signal of your trumpet, and then you can have a clean signal of the effect as well. So it's almost like you're running a trumpet through an effects loop that is cool, but also you can mix it into the balance of the song, and I think it just opens up far more possibilities as to what you can do with it live. Why use pedals? As I was just saying, it expands the possibilities of tones you can achieve whilst playing. Traditional mutes are slightly limiting. The traditional mutes are also very hard to capture through a microphone, unless you're playing in a studio where you can have as many mics as you want. Generally, if you're playing live, you chuck one of those. Generally a Shure SM58 or a 57 if they're feeling fancy. And capturing you using a Harman or a plunger or a cut mute especially is quite difficult. And sound guys don't do necessarily a great job. So therefore pedals. I was saying in the industry.
Not doing a good
It can give you extra opportunities as well. So on that board I've also got an harmonizer, so it fattens out the brass section, and alongside Sarah, who's playing tenor, we can add a third harmony. If she has a harmonizer, a fourth harmony, a sub, octave down, and it's not good for your technique Gramsci to play trumpet one-handed. Mutes versus pedals. It's a debate that many people have on online forums, because trumpeters are generally nerds, and they like to chat about it on online forums. Mutes change the sound of the instrument at the source, so you have no option to have the clean. If you put a mute in, you're stuck with it, essentially. It's a bad thing, but you don't need amplification. If I turned up here and there's a power cut, I could still use the traditional mutes, but I couldn't use pedals. Unless we had a backup generator. You're also limited by the amount of mutes you have. You don't have the wet-dry option. Some people like the physical nature of a mute, like for example, a plunger, which is this red boy right here. You can feel and you can see how far open your pedal is almost if you treat this as a pedal. And so from that perspective, if you don't have great monitoring, you can't really hear what's coming out live, but out the front of house. But with the plunger, you can feel, you can experience the liveness, if that's a word, of the performance. But pedals offer more versatility. Amplification means the venue size isn't an issue. We could have played to 14,000 people there. Who knows? We weren't, but we could have done. With Thomas Loud running anyway. There are thousands of pedals. As I said, Boss have 104 in their line. Not necessarily all working for trumpet, but certainly more options than the 5 I've got in my trumpet case. 5 mutes I've got in my trumpet case. And you can add a tuner pedal, which is helpful. I do that sometimes when I was playing live, because tuning's a bit of a nightmare. And when you use certain mutes, you have to detune your trumpet because it affects the tuning. So, for example, a harmony mute, you have to make it more flat because it sharpens what you're playing. Downside to using pedals, you lose the natural tone of the trumpet. Some argue. It's going getting sent through all these pedals. It's relying on how good your microphone is, and the natural tone of a trumpet can cut across a big room anyway. It doesn't work very well if you're in a small venue. As I said, trumpets are quite loud, and so if we're in here, for example, if we didn't have such a good sound guy, you might not have heard it because realistically, I'm loud enough as it is against the drum kit without any amplification. And so small venues, I've turned up and he's barely put anything through the mic, through the signal, through the front of house anyway, so it's basically pointless me using them. It can distract you from simply playing the trumpet. Classical people, your classicists like Wynton Marsalis would be like, oh, just play trumpet, enjoy the tones of the trumpet, and that's what it's there for. But the more reliance on technology you get, the more you go wrong. Technology, as we've seen, doesn't always work to our favour. Technical limitations. Converting the signal from a balanced to unbalanced and back again can introduce noise. If you could have heard, you might have done, depending how good your ear is, when we played live, there's a slight hiss due to, I don't know whether might be a cheap power supply, it might be one of the pedals isn't grounded properly and so therefore is introducing a bit of earth to it. But when you're changing from a mic clip to a guitar connection, you can introduce noise sometimes. Due to the trumpet's dynamic range, some pedals don't work very well and some are more effective. The signal has to be very wet when you're playing with mutes on a trumpet signal, if it's a small venue, because if it's a venue like this, there's no point in me being amplified my clean signal through the front of house because I'm loud enough anyway. So if it's more wet and more effects, then you get more pedals. Bibliography. There you go. And I believe that concludes my presentation on trumpets. So, any questions? Any queries? Anyone?
No, I think you've covered. I did have a couple of questions, but I think you've covered them in the end. So yeah,
Cool.
yeah. Thank you. Well done. And thanks to your band for coming in.
Yeah, thanks.
So,
Thank you who aren't needing to be here for being here. Yes. It was much more pleasant.